morning everyone, and welcome to my studio. I'm Susan Smith, Stitched by Susan, and today I'm going to be quilting a project from start to finish. A couple housekeeping things before we launch. I'm wearing a wireless mic, and we've been having trouble this morning with interference, so it could be the neighbor's cordless phone, it could be almost anything. So my husband is monitoring the whole situation. He's behind the cameras, right? Behind the monitors. But if you have any trouble hearing, we'll just keep adjusting as we need to. There's Dave waving at you. So let us know if it's not coming through or if there's terrible crackles and pops or whatever, and we'll do our very best. Of course, this is completely live, so lives do sometimes have problems. So we'll do our best to deal with the hiccups as we go. But welcome to my studio. My purpose for these live sessions is, well, I'll back up a little bit. In life, when you're learning anything, it is so helpful to be able to watch someone, right? You can absorb and learn so much just from seeing another person do what it is that you're trying to do. Even if you're not a beginner, you can just find tips, little shortcuts, things like that from working alongside someone. Well, long arming, we don't get to do that very often, right? Because we've each got this giant machine and we can't very well run to each other's places of work and share our day. So my purpose then in these live episodes is to just invite you into my studio to see a quilt happen from start to finish. So if I have a thread tangle, that will be in the show. Nothing gets edited out. So you're seeing it in real time from start to finish. So that does come sometimes with wrinkles, you know, sound problems, or occasionally we've actually been kicked right out of Facebook and had to come back in. These things do happen. We'll just do our best to reduce the problems, but I want you to have the chance to see just how doing a quilt works from beginning to end in my studio. So I do have a mic on. I'll kind of chat as I do it. It's not necessarily instructional, definitely not a class, but you are free to type in questions at any time. We'll pause a few times throughout for me to get a chance to read the questions, pop them on the screen so everyone can see them and answer them as best I can. And I'll just kind of natter on as I quilt about what I'm doing and why. So today's project is an edge-to-edge design. Maybe pop up some pictures, Dave. I've got a couple pictures of what we're doing today on another quilt, and then things that I've done in past shows so that you kind of get a sense what these little live and unscripted episodes are like. So this is the design I'll be quilting today, this wavy kind of thing. So that's that, and then we've got a few pictures of ones we've done in the last few weeks. This is kind of an orange peel type design, which worked beautifully on that quilt because it had a pre-marked grid, right? Here's another one. I call this one the plume, kind of a feathery shape. All of these are freehand, all over feathers, a perennial favorite. And then this last one is a custom quilt. So from time to time, I will do one of these as well, and it's usually a multiple day project because I can't finish it all in one day. So we just do kind of a section or an area in one day and then move on to it the next. So, you know, once again, it's not necessarily instructional, not necessarily something you'll want to do exactly the same way at home. It's just a chance for you to kind of come into my studio and watch over my shoulder as I produce these quilts. So today will be an edge to edge. My local town, as do many, has a guild, and that guild has an arm which does charity quilts for various, you know, foster kids, hospices, things like that. And they're always looking for long arm quilters who will quilt those projects. And other people do the piecing, and usually other people do the binding, and so it's kind of a community affair. So I'm going to be quilting one of those today. So without further ado, I'll put away my coffee and we'll get started. Do I want Lucy on the right, Dave? Okay. This, by the way, you can't see my head anymore. This is my friend Lucy. Lucy, my long arm. I'm quilting on a Gamel 26-inch Elevate machine today. So let's move Lucy out of the way and we'll get our quilt loaded up. Is that far enough? I just don't want to run over any wires. See, this is the beauty too of having, let me see, we have 3 cameras, 3 monitors, I don't know how many cables, a lot, all of which I'm trying to steer around. I use the red snapper system for loading. This can also easily be done with pins. I've done that for years too, but either way, my method of loading does not involve centering the quilt on the long arm or on the leaders. So this first side I just place in whatever area I want to be quilting, whether I'm pinning or whether I'm using my red snapper. I just place it on here with a straight edge along the leader. And then the excess backing just flips completely over the long arm and hangs down the other side. And in this way, I'm able to avoid needing to center my project because I just pull it over smoothly and straight and let it hang, and then I roll it on, and it rolls on beautifully straight and flat. I'm spritzing it a little bit just with water because there are some kind of long-term folding creases in here, and just that little bit of moisture will relax those creases, and I do not need to iron it. I don't know when I last ironed a backing. Years ago, I think it's safe to say. So as I roll, I'm just keeping a weather eye out that I'm not getting any creases as it's rolling on. And that rolls on flat and smooth. And I'll walk around to the back to affix my snappers. If you do have any questions, if you would just add a capital Q or the word question nice and big, that catches our eye and then we're sure to see them. Yeah, no kidding. And here's another tip. Like, I don't know if you can see this on camera, but this end of my backing is not straight, and I do not have to worry about squaring it up. I've only pulled it on until my shortest area, which is right here, just has enough. And then the other excess will just hang off on this side or wherever that excess may be. But I don't have to worry about squaring up quilt tops either. I do quilt for clients, and I think it's safe to say more than 50% of the quilts come in not squared on the backing. And, excuse my breathing hard, with this method, I don't have to worry about taking the time to square them up or even about bugging my quilters to square their tops. As long as they have one or two straight edges, and they usually do have selvage edges somewhere, I'm golden. And there we have it. Beautifully smooth, flat, easy peasy. And I'm using Hobbs 80/20 batting today, which in this case is provided for me by our guild, but it is also my favorite batting and the one I use most of the time. So a little plug in there for Hobbs. They have great products at reasonable price. Love them. So I lay the batting on and then the little quilt, and this is an uber simple quilt. I'll hold it up for you. You can't really see it. There, you get an idea of it. It's really simple. Let me just take the label off. I told you it really is live and unscripted. I could have had all this done in advance, but I thought, no, I'll just show everybody how it really looks. I float my tops, which is to say, I line them up at the top of my long arm. I baste around the perimeter as I'm quilting, but this front edge just floats down over the front. I don't think ever rolled a quilt top. There are reasons for and reasons against. This method works for me, particularly because I do a lot of edge-to-edge quilting. It's maybe not as fussy as show quilts or something might be, and I find I can get a perfectly accurate and square quilt this way. It satisfies me. So This particular quilt is the Washington State Quilters Guild. And actually, well, Washington State Quilters Guild. And we also have a second one, which is the Inland Northwest Machine Quilters. And I'm in both of them. A little sip of coffee to go on. But the charity portion is from the State Guild. So I just based the 3 sides of my quilt, left, top, and right, before I begin quilting. My Lucy does have a channel lock, which means I can magnetically lock it into following a straight line. And so I'll do that up the left. Pause at the top corner. Put the horizontal lock on. And this enables me to get a really nice straight beginning line. You certainly could do this with a longer basting stitch. I'm just doing it with my regular stitch length, just to save time. There's no point in changing, in my opinion. And down the right hand side. We're all set. Now, I do not have an under machine camera, so my quickest way to check my tension is to feel with my fingernails, to run them tightly along that stitching on the bottom, and I would feel right away if that bottom thread was tight, and of course if the top thread is tight I can see it. So that's my quick tension check. And I'm just putting a clamp on either side with a little bit of tension as well. And then we're ready to quilt. Those of you who were watching me a week or 2 ago, I had just gotten this new clamp. Red Snapper now has a new model, a new, I don't know, they redesigned anyway, their clamp. And it is not as easy to apply, and that's a fact. So I'm still getting the hang of it. So if you wonder what the heck I'm doing over here on the left side of the quilt, I'm still trying to get that edge into the very slim channel of this clamp. I actually was on the phone with the store where I purchased it yesterday, kind of asking them about it, and they're in agreement. It's not as easy, but they feel like if I persist, I'll get the hang of it. So alrighty, we have a clamp on both sides. And the last thing I do is put my trusty magnetic bars on the front. So this, in my opinion, goes well with floating the front. It serves the same purpose as rolling your front would have, or your top, is it keeps it from being able to pull up as you're quilting. So I just put little magnetic bars on the front because I have magnetic rails. I can do that. And we're all set. Do we want to do a question before I... Okay, let me try this. That's black light. That's no light. Or do you need me to start quilting before you make that decision? Ooh, that's a big shadow, isn't it?
Well, either way there's a shadow, so it doesn't really matter. We may go with no light if you don't care.
I don't care. I've got plenty of overhead light.
Okay.
Okay, we'll try it with this, and you ladies let us know if that shadow is really interfering. I'm not exactly sure
Maybe there are
how we
men
will
watching.
remove the shadow, but I might try several light options, and then you can tell us which one is best.
Maybe there are men watching.
Dave says maybe there are men watching, and so I should be careful about the pronouns I'm using. So, okay, going to start quilting some waves. I'm just going to lower my rail. It's bouncing a little bit, and I can reduce that. Hello? Hello from Edmonton, where it's -1,000,000. Okay, that's funny. So, if you're new here, you may know I am a Canadian by birth. You probably hear that in my voice, eh? And I grew up in northern BC, so even north of Edmonton. So I know all about the cold. We joke that we moved to the inland northwest for the climate. So that's really what the rest of the morning will be. Moving back and forth along this quilt top. So shout if you have any questions about the loading process. What else could I be telling you? I am using Isacord 100% poly thread in kind of a tan color. I am definitely a fan of polyester threads. They're stronger than cottons, and most were designed with high-speed stitching in mind. Isacord in particular was designed for embroidery machines years ago because they work at high speeds too, right? Thousands and thousands of stitches per project. Very suitable for this. So lots of companies make poly now. I don't think it particularly matters which brand. But I definitely do not recommend a cotton on a long arm. It's just too linty and not strong enough for the high-speed stitching. I'm not using any kind of guideline for my lines. I'm eyeballing this completely, but I am constantly adjusting as I go. I find some waves are bigger than others, you know, narrower or wider. And so with every row, I'm trying to be aware of that and keep evening them out. And I certainly could put a marking tape or a chalk mark to mark my row. I don't. I find that when I kind of get in a rhythm, I don't have any trouble keeping it pretty much straight, and usually piecing will give you a bit of a guideline too. I think we can do one more row. There we go. Stop with needle down and we shall advance the whole thing. Sure, if you have any questions, now's the moment to type them in. As soon as I get my advance done, I will stop and pop them on the screen for a minute. A little side note here, often when I'm doing a freehand design, I will load the quilt sideways because it's more efficient, right, to do wider and fewer passes. For this particular design, I like it directional with the waves going from side to side. And so I chose to load it the long and thin way to keep my waves in the direction I wanted them to be. So that's kind of a thought to consider when you're loading a quilt, is whether that matters. And if it doesn't matter, it's always more efficient to have the length of the quilt from side to side. Not quite. And you may notice that I'm not able to quilt very close to my front bar, my front rail. That is because I've got my quilt lowered at the back side here. Can you see it? I've got it lowered right down. It's almost against, so that it reduces the vibration for you guys watching. So that's kind of a balancing act. If I lifted my back rail about an inch, I would be able to quilt quite a bit further forward. It's this curve at the back of my machine that's, you know, holding me up right there. So that might be another consideration. If you tend to forget where that is and bump up against it, you might, you know, lay a chalk line or a piece of tape along here to remember where your perimeter is. Or my method is just to know where my basting ends, and I know that's as far as I can go, right? Okay, questions? You want to put the front camera on, Dave? Okay. Except my head's chopped off. There we go. Yeah, I'd like to have a head. Okay, Michelle, I'm glad you started from the beginning. I've never seen the red snappers being used. Learned a lot. Yeah, and I mean, I certainly didn't go through all the details, but I love the red snappers. They're the fastest method I've found. But as I said, I did use pins for a long time, and they're perfectly adequate too. The red snappers, you kind of heard me huffing and puffing, like they take a bit of effort. So, you know, if your hands don't like doing that kind of squeezing effort, they may not be the best choice for you, but I do love them for sure. Betty, hello from Burr, Edmonton, Alberta. So we still have kids living in Canada, and one of them is in Fort St. John, which perhaps you know. It's kind of at the southern end of the Alaska Highway, but don't let the word southern fool you. It's very northern, and yeah, it's really cold up there, so I've been getting weather reports this week too from the kids. Sam, do you do much pantograph quilting? Confession time, I have never quilted a pantograph. I've always loved doing it freehand, and I just launched into that. And I think that doing pantographs well is a bit of a skill also. And so I have not developed that skill. Like, I think you could get faster in terms of lining up the paper and the edges of your quilt and the repeats and all that stuff. I've never invested time into learning to do that. So there's that one. Sierra, why don't you have to square up when using red snappers? Because the action of pulling it over the back of the quilt keeps the fabric straight. So as long as I apply it straight at this edge, even if the edge is not straight, I need to know where a straight edge is there. So if I have a selvage or a nicely straight cut on my first front edge, and I get that loaded on, and then I take care that my quilt goes smoothly over, doesn't have any creases, you know, pulling it to one side or the other, smoothly over, and then I just roll it on, it's straight. There are other methods, and if you watch more of these episodes, you'll see me sometimes I'll have a measuring tape across the top, you know, and as I'm quilting, I'm lining up my edges perfectly and that sort of thing. There are different ways that I apply to get more exacting stuff, but it is safe to say that even my queen size quilts are within a 1/4 inch, well within a 1/4 inch of square, perfectly square. It works really, really well. Which guild are you a member, Janet? Yeah, Washington State Quilters Guild. And they call it Spokane Chapter because it's here in Spokane. It's not really on the western side of the state, but it is the Washington State Quilters Guild. And then Inland Northwest Machine Quilters is, I don't think there's very many machine quilting guilds actually across the U.S., but we do have a very thriving machine quilting community here in Spokane. So I'm the vice president of that. And then another one that we have here is the Inland Northwest Modern Quilt Guild. So that's a chapter of the National Modern Quilt Guild, and I'm in that one too. So quilt guilds everywhere. Okay, gotta put my stretchers on. Here I am with my troublesome, there's just a tiny little fold on this leftern edge of the fabric, leftmost edge, I don't know what the adjective is that I want. Anyway, I'm having a terrible time getting it into this thin little crease. But I'm getting it. I persist. Okay, now I have to make sure which way I was going. You do have to alternate left and right to get this little wavy design working out correctly. And I need to go the other way. No, I need to start on this side. Sorry about that. You're seeing my thought processes at work and even my self-doubt. So as I mentioned, this is a 26-inch machine, so therefore 26-inch throat space. So when I roll a quilt way to the top like this, I'm pretty much quilting on my tippy toes for the first couple rows. So if it's a trickier design, I don't do that. I, you know, just make my forward advance a little smaller to keep it more within arm's reach. But this being a simple design, I can afford to get away with it. So I'm using my piecing line here as a guideline now to make sure my waves are running more or less straight across the quilt. My tail in there. I do have the stitch regulator on at the moment, which means that my stitch length is preset and my machine speeds up and slows down the motor relative to the speed at which I'm moving. But generally, when I'm not talking into a microphone and I'm doing freehand work, I will actually turn that stitch regulator off. I just like the smooth quality, both of the sound of the engine and just of the groove I kind of get into. So that is my preference. But when I'm multitasking like this, then I put that stitch regulator on. That way if I need to pause, I don't get a big old thread bung up. So I'm curious, what do you guys do when you're quilting? Are you, a headphones on, something going in your ear like music or podcast or audiobook? Or are you all about the quiet? Or do you need to hear the machine to give you a sense of what's going on? Everyone does it differently. So that'll be our next topic, next time I pause. So jot your preferences in there. And I'm always on the lookout for new Audible books or podcasts to listen to too. So if you've got any great suggestions, give me those too. This quilt has a very busy backing. You can't even begin to see the quilting on the backing. But I will post pictures later today of the texture. I'll try and find some good lighting so that you can really see the result. I know you can't really see it long distance on the camera well, but I will post some pictures on Facebook and Instagram. You notice that I'm putting a little tension on the area that is already stitched. I find that to be very useful to keeping my quilt perfectly flat. If I don't, even if the quilt is perfectly straight to begin with, just the action of the hopper foot moving over it will push a little bit out in front of me, and it will be difficult to keep this edge straight. It will want to push in. So pretty much always when I'm basting, I'm tugging just a little on what's already been stitched, just making sure the fabric is going under the hopper foot at the correct pace. You can see that here too. If I were to let go, it'll just start to push in this way, and I don't want that to happen. So I just keep putting a gentle tug on. And if I've got excess to pull in, well, then I do much more than a gentle tug. I just pull that fabric in, that extra. But this one's nice and flat. And with every pass, I'm smoothing, honestly, almost down over the front rail to keep that smooth. What I definitely don't want is for the interior area of my quilt to be pulling up faster than the edges. And that's what's apt to happen. Again, even if your quilt is perfectly flat when you start. So I'm always hedging against that, if you will. Okay, what's funny? Dave's laughing. I must see what's funny. One second here while I get my snapper on. Move the quilt. Okay, I'm ready. Dave's just killing himself laughing. Somebody's being funny. Okay, I can't see anything, Dave. There we go. All right. Sam, I listen to other people quilt and pretend they're here, not creepy at all. True story. But, this is as close as we long armers can get to having a, quilting bee. So, okay, Betty, we're in a condo 1 level, so I'm usually listening to my husband's music in the background. He's the one that remembers to put music on. I'm just as happy to quilt away and get in the zone in silence. And Kay, sometimes music, mostly quiet, listening to the machine. And some do that. They really want to hear the sound of the machine, and that just is another, gauge for that things are going well or not. Linda, audiobook, music mainly. Yeah, I'm a huge audiobook fan. Oh gosh. Margie, I listen to old shows like Gunsmoke or the Andy Griffith Show. That's a good idea too. Yeah. Shows that you don't have to necessarily pay a lot of attention to still get some enjoyment out of. Robin, noise canceling headphones with the podcast. Yep, that's my usual too. I have these big old headphones that I wear. And hence having the machine on the non-regulated. It's just a smoother, more even sound, and I don't get that revving of the motor, and I like that. Sierra was headphones and an audiobook. Sheila, as you move down and reach a seam, do you adjust your waves at that point? Yes. So you can't see it in the picture now, but we're going to come across a seam, and so yes, as I'm approaching that nice straight line in my piecing, I'm using that as a visual guideline if my waves need a little adjusting. It's much like handwriting, right? Some people have a tendency to run up to the right, and some have a tendency to go down to the right. So whatever visual cue you need, if piecing is enough, if there are enough lines to keep you going more or less straight, well and good. If not, I suggest, painter's tape stretched across or something like that will keep things pretty straight. Oh, David Smith. Those of you in the masterclass should recognize this pattern. Yes, and a few of you are in my masterclass. Sheila, yep, and it's harder to do than it looks. Practice, practice, practice. It's true, Sheila. This is a fun one, though. I'll give a wee plug for my masterclass. This is one of the designs I teach, and in the class, I think I do it on a shallower kind of wave, and it's a different look. It's just an example of how really the smallest change can make a very different look. So we're doing quite pronounced waves today, but you can also do much more gentle undulations for a different look. Cindy, I normally have Christian music playing while I quilt. Yep, always inspirational and usually cheerful music, right? Which is a good thing. I agree. Okay, back to a few more rows of quilting. And I'm at that age now where I have to take my glasses off to read what's over there on the screen and put them back on to see what's in front of me. Yeah, that happened in a hurry. Right about the time I probably turned 50. Nasty surprise. I've always had 20/20 vision, so yeah, that was an adjustment for me. And I'm using my piecing line here, and I see that I've been running uphill a little bit toward the right, so I can't make that change all in one pass, but over the next few rows I'll be making my waves on the right side purposely a little deeper and on the left side a little shallower to try and even out the straightness of my row. Don't they say that's a sign of an eternal optimist? When your handwriting runs uphill? And I'm going to include when your quilting runs uphill. It's my story anyway, and I'm sticking to it. I think I can do one more. And there we are. And I think just one more pass and we'll have it. There's the end right there. So I'm very much eyeballing my left and right sides and not turning my channel lock on because they are quite straight, but I will turn the channel lock on the bottom so that I'm positive that I get a nice square perimeter on my quilt. And as you can see, I'm quite close to the edge, but it's catching everywhere, so that's the main thing. And once again, I'm putting a little tension on, I don't know if you can see it in the camera, on the area that's already been stitched. If I don't, my fabric will push out in front of me and be stretching out just a little, but across the whole width of a quilt, especially a big quilt, that just a little multiplies. So I'm just putting a little bit of tension on the back here. Just that very smallest amount is enough to keep it feeding under nice and smoothly. And again, my thumb is in front of the machine now, just pulling just the slightest bit on that area that's already been stitched. So it's all basted. Now I don't know, someone early on in my quilting showed me how to load a quilt, and they basted as I've done, you know, the sides as they were progressing and the bottom and top. I have seen a lot of people quilting. For example, we have a local longarm shop that has a number of machines that they have rented over the years. And so you can go in there sometimes and watch just various people quilting. And I see lots of people quilting without doing that perimeter basting. I would not attempt that myself. I think the difference in quality and squareness of your quilt is significant and is totally worth the couple minutes of time it takes. Let's do some questions now, and in polls if we have them, and I'll grab my coffee while we do that. Coffee's important. And front camera if you would, Dave. Coffee. Nectar of the quilters. Okay, Cindy, I love E2E FMQ. Also enjoy custom FMQ with a little ruler work. Honestly, so do I. One of the things, well, again, I'll back up. You heard us refer to my master class, which is a class that I'm currently teaching, and it runs for 6 weeks, and it's just a really deep dive into my methodology, my thought process for quilting, particularly edge to edge, but definitely freehand designs. And, you know, ways to troubleshoot, ways to break down your design and understand it, and ways to really elevate your skill. So in that class, I kind of lost my train of thought, Dave. Put up her question again, would you? Sorry about that. Oh yeah, free motion with a little ruler work. Yes. One of my points in that class is doing stuff like this and other edge-to-edge work, while you can think of it as a lower level skill, if you do it sort of purposefully and with intent and focus, this can be a part of really elevating your skill. And so when you come to do custom quilting and finer quilting or show quilts or whatever, that skill is there at your fingertips, right? So don't dismiss the level of practicing that this gives you. And so maybe you've noticed I don't quilt as fast as a lot of quilters do, but I think I quilt more purposefully. Again, I see quilters, and I don't mean to disparage them. That's their style. There are quilters that are super fast, and that's their thing. But, you know, they just kind of wing their machine through the circles and through the curves, and, you know, that's a way. But I don't think that advances your control of your machine. So I'm probably a little slower than some. Gets the job done. Okay, love this pattern, can really get in the groove. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, I forgot to change the cameras. Sam, I just tried turning off my regulator machine. My machine stitches too slow with it off. So, meaning it doesn't keep up to you and your stitches are too long. Can you not change that? Because usually when the regulator is off, you can set the speed that the needle goes, right? As a percentage of the total speed your machine will run. So that's entirely changeable too. Kathy, can you show us how to judge the tension on the top of the frame? Oh, the tension of the quilt, I assume you mean. Yes, absolutely. That's an easy one. And again, lots of these tips that I tell you aren't original to me. I've heard and seen them from other quilters. And so this one I think was from maybe Linda's Electric Quilters. I'm not sure who to give credit to. But anyway, here's an easy way. Put your one hand under the quilt and push up with your fingertips, and you should be able to grasp the quilt around those fingertips. This should not be taut like a drum. You shouldn't be able to pound out your music on it. Just enough tension to keep it smooth and flat. Hope that helps. Oh yeah, let's do some polls for fun. Okay.
So this is your favorite?
Yep, Edge to Ed Freedom 69%. Woohoo! I have found my people. Custom quilting is my jam, 8%. I think for a lot of us who do edge to edge work, like we like doing custom too. It's just not necessarily our favorite. So I see that there are some of you here though. So good for you. And give me a pantograph any old day. Good. You know, each of these things are a bit different skills, right? Learning to load a pantograph and do it accurately and do it well and be able to stitch smoothly without looking, you know, kind of at your needle. That's a whole skill, which honestly I have not mastered much. Okay, while quilting, I listen to my significant other. I'm happy to see not a lot of you do that. Music, 50%, audiobooks, 25, podcasts, 8.
By the way,
Yes?
2 votes for my significant other. I was one of those because I do this with my significant other.
Dave's telling me he was one of the votes for listening to my significant other, so good for him. I would love to hear from you ideas, especially for podcasts, because I've kind of gotten into them lately. And one that I recently found is called Declutter and Organize. And can I think of the name of the lady who's doing it? I think it's Kim. Anyway, it's particularly geared toward creatives and their creative space. So I have really enjoyed listening to her. She had a podcast about, you know, organizing your works in progress and making decisions about them and accomplishing them and those sorts of things. It just is geared toward what we're doing, not about kitchens and pantries necessarily. So I enjoyed hers. Oh, the next poll that's coming up. Well, we don't know answers to that yet. Okay, I'm going to quilt the last pass and then we'll chat a bit more and then call it good for today. So this is recorded, by the way. You can come back to this Facebook page at any time to find it in previous videos. And also, we will load it to my YouTube channel, also called Stitched by Susan. So if that's your preferred platform for watching, you're certainly welcome to do that. If you like watching on YouTube, I encourage you to like and subscribe. And once you've done that, you can click on the little bell and you'll actually get a notification whenever a new one drops. one of my mantras, certainly, for freehand quilting is it's not about perfection. For me, it is about quilting carefully. You can see I'm doing that, but it is not perfect. You know, my waves are intended to just touch the row above and bounce off. Sometimes they overlap a little bit, sometimes they fall a bit short of the mark, but overall, I'm after a good textural look when it's all said and done. Not so much perfection. I do want, after all, for it to look hand done, handmade. If I wanted perfection, I would just let the computer do it. So even after all my endeavors to straighten it, I'm still about 1/2 inch from touching on my right hand side. So I'm just going to go back and pretend like I'm adding in, you know, the crest of those waves, like as though there were another row in there. So I'm just trying to envision what those would look like if I was quilting right off the edge of the quilt. And I'm just adding in that last little bit. I don't want it to look like I stopped before I was quite finished, you know? There we go. And a few little lock stitches to finish it off. And we're done. So I will move Lucy far to the right and unload. And like I said, I will put up some pictures on Facebook and Instagram. Later today, I'll find some good lighting and take a few pictures so you can really get a good look at this texture. Is that good? Okay. Oh, okay. Comments or questions? Yep, let's do it. New camera angle, dear. A huge thanks, by the way, to my husband who mans this whole thing. So he's fortunate in his type of work. Most of it is from home, that he's able to devote whole mornings from time to time to doing this for me. So it's a bit of a setup. Sometime I'll have to post a picture of what the other side of the room looks like, because it's a mess of wires and monitors and cables and stuff. Anyway, shout out today for that. And also actually a thank you to my friend Dan Unger, who is the live, not the live, but the music that you're hearing in the background today. He is a fantastic guitar player. Okay, questions and comments. Jana, I prefer E to E, not very good at pantos. Yeah, like I said, they're a skill all their own. I think you have to do it quite a bit to get proficient at that. Linda, much prefer to stitch unregulated myself. Yeah, there is quite a difference. It can be a bit daunting when you're used to the regulator and you launch into it, but it doesn't take very long to get used to. Linda, again, I've not tried pantos, although I had a bunch come with my pre-loved machine and frame. One day, maybe. I mean, another thing that I do with pantos, like I even shop the Pantograph sites, I get ideas from them sometimes. And not all pantos are translatable into freehand because they're not always sort of logical in how you move in and out of a motif. So, you know, when I'm doing a freehand design, it's got to be fairly easy to learn and to move into and out of. So I can't do a bird, for example, you know, starting with his feet and then adding his body and then his head. That's not a very logical thing. But that said, there are lots of pantos that can give you lots of ideas for a new leaf design or a new flower design. So that's a good use for your pantos, even if you don't quilt them. Okay, the poll. Are you a straight line aficionado or a curly whirly swirly person? 87% curly whirly swirly. Well, see, now I would be in the straight line part of that poll. I do quilt a lot of swirls because that's what my customers tend to like, but I love straight line quilting. And I love doing things that are like repeated a million times that are just texture. So if you've seen my Crazy Eights design, that would be an example. It is not pictorial at all, if that's the right word. It's just fairly contemporary in that it's just a texture laid down. That's my style of quilting for sure. Anything else? Jana, curly whirly swirl is more forgiving than straight lines. In many respects, that is true. When I say straight line quilting, though, you've seen me use my channel locks. So usually it will be parallel lines and I can lock them into place. So whether they're 1 inch apart or 1/4 inch apart or irregularly spaced, they're still straight, and they're pretty forgiving because my machine locks them into place. So I'm very lucky that way, for sure. Okay, Linda, I agree. Perfection is for the computerized quilting. Yeah, truth. There's a place. There's absolutely a place for computerized quilting, and my current Lucy, this is Lucy 2.0, and I just acquired her a couple of months ago. And so I do now have the Elevate system, which is a modest computerized system, and I use it from time to time when there's time constraints or whatever. Sometimes I choose to use the computerized system, and there's a place for it. And some people are very artistic with their computers, and yay for them. That's just not what I love. So, Linda, he's a top man. Yes, he is. He is a keeper. Okay, we don't need the glasses anymore because we're unloading now. I keep my side clamps, the front ones, really short. Pull my little leader over the front rail and clamp it into place so it's actually all ready to load the next quilt. And one of the services that I provide for my clients, because I have a big table in my side room, is I trim all these edges with a rotary cutter and a ruler. I trim a nice 1/4 inch perimeter around that basting so it is totally ready for them to take home and put the binding on. I quite like doing that. I know a lot of quilters don't, but I mean, it takes a few minutes of time, but not very much because I've got a setup always in place, and it just makes my package that I'm returning to my client look so sharp. It folds beautifully, and I just give this lovely tailored little package, and I give them back their fabric bits that are left over, and if they provided the batting, I give them back that too for their crafty projects. Oh wow, I bet you're having chilly weather too, Yvonne, in White Bear Lake, Minnesota. Weeks. Yeah. Well, welcome, Yvonne. So I'll say once again, I've said it a couple times already, but this is replayable in my Facebook page, Stitched by Susan, at any time. And later today, we will also upload it to YouTube, today or tomorrow. Sometimes we have to do a little bit of editing at the beginning and end, and it takes a bit of time to upload that to YouTube. So it'll be replayable there. If you like and subscribe on YouTube, then if you hit the bell, you will get a reminder whenever a new one comes. And I'm trying to do these about every second week, and it is a bit of a project to set up, so usually I do a couple in quick succession when we do set them up. So yeah, and I'm curious, feel free to comment. I'll see your comments even if they're added later on, but feel free to comment if you prefer to see the edge to edge, you know, one and done in a morning projects, or if you also enjoy the custom project, which the Lone Star that I did a few weeks ago was one of those, where I just did an area of it each day. I think we ran it for 4 days. Or do you like both? Let me know, and that's the kind of thing I'll bring more of. Question, Yvonne, it's brutal, weather, but it's sunny and clear with no wind, so indoors it's gorgeous. How nice. And you know, that was something that I experienced growing up in northern Canada too. Very cold, certainly in the winter, or could be bitterly cold, but we did get a lot of sunshine. And that is significant. If you come from a rainy area, sunshine can be a real treat. So, okay, we will be back tomorrow, 8 o'clock Pacific time tomorrow morning, because I have other commitments in the afternoon, so doing it a little bit earlier. And again, it's going to be a one and done edge to edge project. So I welcome you to come back tomorrow if you can. If you're not available in the morning, you can always catch it later on. I invite you to share with friends, invite your friends to come, those that are interested in freehand or edge to edge quilting. I would love to meet them too. So until tomorrow, thanks for watching and have a great day.